Hi, I'm Eugene. I'm sitting on my YouTube channel, Christianity That Will Be Done. I'll here a little bit before I give you a brief message. Okay, I'm just going to go into my YouTube office.
In this slide here, we see Charles Spurgeon. When your will is God's will, you will have your will. And I really like that quote. Then we look here, another verse about doing God's will. This is John 4:34. My food, said Jesus, is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work. Again, these are verses telling us about the importance of doing God's will. And so that's what I'm going to be talking about tonight, because I think it is so important. And so another verse here, John 17:4-5. I have brought you glory on earth by finishing the work you gave me to do. And now, Father, glorify me in your presence with the glory I had with you before the world began. We see here Jesus glorified the Father by doing the work God gave him to do on earth. And as you just heard, Jesus is doing the will of the Father. And just to make it clear that Jesus is 100% God, 100% man, and chose to do everything as a human on earth, including suffering. Now, there's some other doctrines out there that say he emptied himself and he wasn't God when he was on earth, but that's wrong. I got a simple question. Who was holding the universe together when Jesus was on earth? I don't think he said, hey, Father, by the way, when I go to earth, you're going to have to look after everything, all the stars. I counted all the molecules. I hold all things together. It looks like, Father, you're going to have to do that. I don't think he said that. I know that while he was on earth, he was still holding all things together. But he chose to suffer as a human, live as a human, to give us hope, give us salvation. So I just want to make that point really clear. And then when we look at the next slide here, as another verse. So Jesus said, when you have lifted up the Son of Man, then you'll know I am he, and that I do nothing on my own, but speak just what the Father has taught me. The one who sent me is with me. He has not left me alone, for I always do what pleases him. And again, there you go about doing God's will. It is so important. If Jesus does the will of God, 100%. So what about us? Can we strive to do that? Yes. And another verse we have here. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and perfect worship. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. So wait a minute, when you look at that, we offer our bodies as living sacrifices, okay? And we are not to conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of our mind, focusing on God, focusing on the Bible, and separating ourselves from the world. And when we do that, the reason is, get this, then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is. He didn't say what his patience is or how pleased you make it for him. He says, then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. And again, Romans 12:1-2. So I want to really stress that point there, because a lot of times we overlook that part and it just kind of gets thrown in there that, we got to separate from the world. Yes, we do. But why we have to separate from the world? And that's the point that I want to make, is we actually have to separate from the world. We have to be in Scripture, fellowshipping with the brothers and sisters. We have to do all these things so that we can do the will of God. So very important. If Jesus did not do 100% the will of God in his humanity on earth, he would have sinned. Think about that. He had to do it 100%. So we can't do it 100%, no. But we've been given righteousness and we are being sanctified. And by the time our sanctification is finished and we die and we go to heaven, final sanctification, then we will be doing God's will 100% in heaven. Just think about that. It's quite amazing. So again, now you see why I'm so on the importance of doing God's will. We see here a heavenly pattern for our earthly life. And again, this is the quote from Charles Spurgeon, and I'll read it here for you. And follow along with me. A heavenly pattern for our earthly life. Thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Matthew verse 10. Our Father's will shall certainly be done, for the Lord doth according to his will in the army of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth. Let us accordingly consent that it shall be so. Charles Spurgeon, April 30th, 1884. Consent on a heart level. And this is what I want to point out here to you as well. I can't control God by picking and choosing whose will I will follow at any given time. If I fight doing God's will, I am fighting being sanctified in its natural progression set before the foundation of the world. Yet I do not have that power. So he knew forever before. So what that's saying is, no matter what happens, what I do, God already knew the end result. So if I changed something in my life and turned it around, and I say, oh good, I'm going to correct it now. He knew that. Oh, I didn't correct it. He knew that. We can't do something that will catch God off guard. And I guess that's what I'm saying. We can't catch God off guard. He's all-knowing, and that's just his attribute. He is all-knowing. And then I want to quote Peter, 1 Peter 1:14-16. As obedient children, do not conform to the evil desires you had when you lived in ignorance, but just as he who called you is holy, so be holy in all you do, for it is written, be holy because I am holy. And so that's a very good passage there from Peter. Really makes it clear that he's a holy God, and so we need to be holy as well. We're going to look at this part here about how serious is doing the will of God. And it's a great question to ask ourselves, and it's a great question to discuss. So when I go down to the next slide here, we see John 8:28-29, yet another quote from Jesus doing the Father's will on earth. Then Jesus said, when you lifted up the Son of Man, then you will know that I am he, and I do nothing on my own initiative, but I speak just what the Father taught me. And the one who sent me is with me. He has not left me alone, because I always do those things that pleases him. And we know he always does the will of God. He's pleasing the Father. He's glorifying the Father, and the Father is glorifying him on earth. Quite amazing, quite amazing. Again, now we're going to take a close look at this point by point, this passage here from Matthew 7:21-23. Read along with me. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. Only the one who does the will of my Father in heaven. On that day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, didn't we prophesy in your name and cast out demons in your name and do many powerful deeds in your name? Then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Go away from me, you lawbreakers. So we're going to break this down, but that's pretty amazing. Imagine not doing God's will, but you're still doing things, and God is working through you to do different miracles, people coming to the Lord, people being healed, all these different beautiful things. But if you're not following the will of God, he's saying it's not pleasing him. So that, again, that's that. When I read that really motivated me to talk about this. When I think about that, go away from me, you lawbreakers. Just go to the next slide. And here you see the arrow here pointing there. Not everyone says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter into the kingdom of heaven. Now, this here is very interesting, and that's why I want to look at it. In Matthew 7:21, 28, the study notes from the Net Bible too, it has very good information for exegetical study. And so we usually see the vocative, meaning it's a fancy word, the double vocative, two times. Lord, Lord, two times you say Lord, Lord. This is either a high emphasis, it is either a high emotion or emphasis. Even an emphatic confession like this one without a corresponding action means nothing. Okay, all he's simply saying is when you see Lord, Lord, it could be an emphasis, it could be an emotion. Lord, Lord, I love you. Or when you say to me, Lord, Lord, and you don't do my will, that's an emphasis. That's not a nice, oh, that's great. This is a rebuke, is what we're seeing here. So not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter into the kingdom of heaven. We see that. And then on the next slide here, you're going to see this is Jesus speaking here when he says that, Lord, Lord. He's not happy with them. And so we look at that. And then let's go down to the next slide. We see here that Lord, Lord. And then we see here another Lord, Lord here, like I mentioned. When we have that, we see Lord, Lord here. Didn't we prophesy? Now that's a pleading or that's an emotional. Lord, Lord, did we prophesy in your name and cast out demons in your name? Yes, you did, but you didn't do it in my will. I didn't want you to do that. That wasn't what I was calling you to do. That's really very important here. Again, there I underlined it so you can see Lord, Lord in a pleading way. Then he says, go away from me, you lawbreakers. God pushes them away 3 times here. When we look at here, he says, I never knew you. Go away from me. And then in the next part here, he says, you lawbreakers. I want to review that again. We've learned here that this is Jesus who's speaking the words. And when Jesus says, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, that's a emphasis. Okay, and it's an important emphasis that he's saying there again. And then when we see only the people who do the will of my Father in heaven. And then he's saying on that day when you're in front of me, you're going to say, Lord, Lord, I did prophesy. And so I did all these things. Yes, you did. If you did it, you can't deny it. But it's not what he wanted you to do. And that's the point here. Imagine leading someone to Christ. What a beautiful thing. Yes, you were an instrument in that, serving God to do that, but he didn't want you to do that. It's his will that has to be done. Jesus went and healed a lot of people. Then he left those people. People thought, there's more people sick. Come on, Jesus. He said, no, I got to go to another town because I got to do the will of the Father. The Father said, okay, enough here. Go to the next town and now start sharing the gospel. Start preaching the word. And Jesus, being obedient, walked away from how many people? Because he's doing the will of the Father. You say, is that bad or that? God's in control of all things. God's in control of the people he left. God's in control of the people he's going to see and the people he's going to witness to. God is in control of all these things. And so we don't have to try and understand it as much as obey it. Okay, I hope that helps. When I seen that, it just struck me so much. I knew I had to do this video on this. The next slide here. There we go. And so now we see, along with the spiritual gifts comes the responsibility and obedience. So what I'm saying here is we have different gifts, and that's what he's talking about on there. People have the gifts of healing. People have the gifts of casting out demons. They have many gifts, and that's great. And they're the spiritual gifts that we are given uniquely for the glory of God to do his work. But we have a responsibility and obedience in doing that. You can't say, okay, I'm going to go do this, I'm going to do that. That's my gift, I'm going to do it. Yes, but according to God's will. And I'm going to go down to the next slide here. When we're talking about doing God's will and how important that is. If I helped a buddy and he didn't really want me to do something else, oh, I didn't want you to change that tire for me, I had someone else to come help me to do it, I'm not going to be angry at you. He's going to think, thank you, Eugene. Thank you for offering that. You didn't know that. Not with God. How holy God is and how important it is for us to be obedient to God. And obedient to God meaning to do his will. Let's look at that. In the next slide here, we see a definition of holy. So that's a good thing to cover first of all. Now you see the fellow there cutting the meat. He's cutting a piece of meat and then he's sliding it over away from the other meat. Then he cuts another piece and he slides it away. And that's what holy means. You separate and push away. You cut, separate, and push away. That is the Hebrew word for holy. To be holy, I have to be separate from the world. We talked about that in Romans 12:2. When we look at that being holy, separated, that's what God is, infinitely holy. He is so holy that sliding that meat to the end of our universe, to the end of all time and space, doesn't even come close to how holy God is. In that sense, this analogy would be misleading if I didn't explain that. That God is so holy, but our holiness is when we separate from the world and draw closer to God, we are separating closer to God, who is ultimately holy. So I hope that definition helps you there. And when I go down to the next slide here, I'm just going to say, there's the Hebrew word for holy that I just talked about. Just to explain, all this stuff I'm talking here is not about works or good works. Let's say it's not about works. Yeah, we know, Eugene, you're talking about good works. No, what we're talking about here is being obedient to God. Being obedient to God, doing his work, that's good works. Right? That's good works. And then when I go down to the next slide here, so God is far beyond infinitely holy. And that's the point that we're trying to make here. If God is that holy, then we need to strive to be holy. It's so important. And it should be our priority. And I'm just going to talk a little bit here now. When I say that, you're going to say, well, Eugene, that's wonderful. That's great. How do you do that? How did Jesus do it? What was Jesus known for? His prayer life. He prayed early in the morning. He prayed all the time. He was always in prayer. He was communicating with the Father to do the Father's will on earth as a human. Again, 100% God, 100% man. So he chose to do this on earth, to suffer and die according to God's will. So I'm hoping that now that I've explained that to you, that when someone says to you in a ministry or something, oh, why don't you come help me with this? And you might say, well, I've got the gift of hospitality. I'm asked to go in the kitchen and help them there, and I really want to do that. And it seems that Spirit was moving me to do that. No, I got something more important to you to do. I want you to come with me, and I want you to do this ministry here because it's really important. That would not be good. Doing God's will overrides anything. So when we are volunteering on anything, it's good to look at the gifts we have, and I will be talking about that in the future. I think it's an important topic as well. When we're doing what God's gift has given us, he's given us to do, it may be hospitality, it may be leadership, it may be evangelizing, it may be helping people in healing, healing people, praying for them, prayer ministry. All these different things are really good. These gifts, the different gifts we are given, it's wonderful, and we should be exercising them. When we are doing work and someone asks us to do something, the first thing I look at is I say, okay, is that part of my gift? Doesn't mean I'm saying no, but is that part of my gift? And if I say yes, oh, okay. And I'm praying in the Spirit and he's saying yes. But he also, even though it's my gift, he may say, no, Eugene, I want you here. Then I got to be there. It is okay to say no. When I prayed about this, God wants me to do such and such. And I think that's really a good answer. If someone's asking you to do something, you pray and you say, yeah, God wants me to do this. And so this is what I'm doing. But thank you. Thank you. And if I know someone, I'll say, hey, why don't you talk to so-and-so? He loves doing that kind of stuff. Oh, great. Thank you. that kind of thing. Because the fellowship is important, as you know. That concludes this for now. Again, I'll be talking more about the gifts because I did bring them up here, and I think that's really important to do. Leave any comments you have below. That'd be wonderful as well, and that helps me. And if you have questions, I'll do my best to answer them. And give it a thumbs up. Check out these videos here. See you later. God bless.